Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Major League Balatro Weekly Recap. I'm your host, Phantom, and with me is our other host, Sizak. We're just going to get right into it with the spinning of the wheels. First game in every match of Major League Balatro is a random deck and a random stake, and this is how we choose it.
Some weird, like, orange.
Yeah, the one that was there last week, which was white, is not going to be on there again, but green is pretty close. So that's what we're doing.
Ah, man! No high stakes so far. They've all been black or below for the first 4 weeks.
The wheel has spoken.
Yeah, the wheels is being lame.
All right,
It's been giving cool decks, though.
Yep, and the decks, previous two, have been removed. We'll see what deck we get. Zodiac?
Okay. That's not exactly exciting in my mind, but hey. Green Zodiac, I mean, whatever.
Green Zodiac is over again.
Is what it is.
All right, and then we will get right into it with our game of the week. I believe Sizak had a really good one for us, so I'll let him get right into that.
Our game of the week was game 2 of the Zeno versus Halion set. Whole set was pretty neat, but game 2 was the standout one for sure. So, the game ends up with a spicy start where, sometimes you see a rare skip early on and the players will talk about it and come to an agreement about whether they're going to skip or not. The players do, but Halion lies and takes the rare skip despite agreeing not to and seeing Zeno not take it. It does not pay off. It gives him a baseball card, which I'm pretty sure gets sold pretty quickly. He doesn't open the buffoon pack as well in that shop. And in that buffoon pack was a photo. Not only that, but the spectral pack that he did open was an Ankh, and he didn't have any jokers for it. The spectral pack was pretty much useless to him. So Halion ends up early on down double photo, not just a single photo, but double photo. So yeah, it's very bleak, and then it gets even worse when he gets up 4-2 with some tempo, but Zeno ends up finding a Chad and an idol, and the Halion sees the idol as well, but decides he's not going to go with it. Decides idol is fake. So as game goes on, he does end up finding a bloodstone, but it's not enough to keep up with the double photo that Zeno has. Later on, he finds an oops, and he uses some lucky hits to find a dusk that Zeno just isn't quite able to see in the shop. And so with that, the players are both at 2-2 at that point. Halion takes a win in the next PvP because Zeno's idol misses. By the way, so far this game, it hasn't hit once. Zeno does find a dusk in the next ante in order to keep up. He still doesn't get an idle hit, but with more glass and with the double photo versus the oops bloodstone with a single photo, it's not as far apart. So the little bit being up on glass is enough to give him the win again. So it goes down to 1-1. Not only that, but Halion's best glass, he had a glass polychrome that broke. In the next shop, Blueprint shows up, which, if idle doesn't hit, still hasn't yet, then that Blueprint can, it's better to copy Bloodstone with a Blueprint when you got some full retriggers than it is to copy a photo. Zeno's idol still misses.
Oh, no.
Does not hit. Basically a single time all game. He's had it for like 5 antes. Worst idol ever. And despite being down double photo from the start and having a lot of rough things going for him, Halion pulls off an insane comeback and is able to win with the Blueprint Bloodstone copy being a better copy than a third photo. And in fact, I think Zeno might have even had to sell one of the photos, so I don't think he any longer had the double photo because there was some other retriggers and stuff there. And yeah, it was one of the craziest comebacks I've seen in a while. I was commentating and we were saying like I actually said like just kind of jokingly talking about Halion's outs because I knew he had them, but they were like very slim. But you never give up in a multiplayer game because crazy comebacks sure do happen. And I was talking like, okay, here's the crazy thing he needs. He needs Bloodstone Oops to show up that Zeno can't take or whatever, and it actually happened. I actually kind of called it, or at least close to it. And yeah, Halion takes the game. Yeah, so game 1 on our plasma white stake, which is our deck state combo for the week.
Mhm.
Zeno ended up taking an early lead, and then he's able to make the transition to Molt, and Halion never ends up getting out of chips. Zeno's partly did well due to a 8-ball Chad and Splash combo, but yeah, Halion's never able to get out of chips, and Zeno takes the Molt and just goes with it. Game three was a game three was a pretty funny one. Zeno this time the players they split on the rare skip again. I don't think there was lying going on here, but I think this time Zato was the one that took the rare skip, and it gave him an ancient joker. So an actually
Oof.
very useful hit there. Not only that, but there was an onk again, and so Zeno ends up with double onk. Zeno takes some kind of goofy lines, ends up with a sock, takes a showman, gets another sock, and just firmly takes the game with double ancient, double sock, while Halion has one sock, no ancient.
So that was our game of the week, and I will go into the rest of our games. We're going to start off with Nandre versus Vagabond, which was our first game of this week. So game one, again, Plasma White. Nandre, King of Plasma, goes a lot into chips early. Vagabond able to pivot into those glass. Nandre again tried as well, but in the end, Vagabond wins that one with an E18 to E10. With only one life left. So that was the closest game of this entire set. Game two was on Yellow Deck Gold Stake, and Vagabond wins this one pretty convincingly. Even though Nandre has a good amount of econ, actually made more money than Vagabond in this game. But Vagabond is able to secure that scoring and take the win on this one with 2 lives left. And for game three, the final game, this one was kind of a sweep. Vagabond wins on Painted Gold, 4 lives left. Makes like twice as much money as Nandre, just does really well, buys a bunch of vouchers. Honestly, really well played from Vagabond for this last game. I think the most interesting one was that first game on Plasma White, because again, that's Nandre's home court. But that gold stake seems to be pretty strong for Vagabond, and he wins this set 3-0.
Our next set was Scooty versus HC Justin. In the first game, Justin ends up taking a bull, and I think bull is a little bit of a trap in White Stake Plasma if you commit to it too hard, at least, because you need that money to roll down to find important things in the shop, and that is exactly what happens. Is that Justin doesn't roll down enough in the shop. Scooty gets. He gets overly punished as Scooty finds Brainstorm Dusk. Scooty does end up going down to 1 life, but Glass does eventually start showing up, and Scooty is able to take a commanding lead and reverse sweep and win that game. In the second game, we are on White Stake Ghost Deck. Both take some crazy, not take some crazy skips. Both skip some crazy strong jokers in Idle and then later mail-in rebate.
Mm.
Scooty ends up winning because Scooty ends up being up a Brainstorm at some point and then also taking a DNA that Justin does not take, is able to make tons of glass. In fact, at one point we had so much glass that we copied a blue seal instead, and I completely agreed with the play because we were just overflowing with glass and might as well start getting some planet levels now.
Mm.
In the third game, we were on White Stake Erratic Deck. And despite being up Midas Mask that Justin just did not take, Scooty did not manage their econ well. And since they were going for, I believe it was, 5 of a kind blue seal levels, they weren't able to hold as much gold in hand as they would like. And they just never pretty much got interest. Justin ends up being significantly, or at least somewhat ahead on econ and significantly ahead on glass. And even though Scooty did find a Brainstorm Dusk on last life because they found a golden ticket, they did not dig hard enough for their glass in the PvP. Ended up with 0 glass. I think they only had 1 in the deck, and Justin had a whole hand of 5 glass. So despite Dusk Brainstorm, it was only triggering photo a bit, I believe, and that just was not enough. And Justin ended up taking the win before the Dusk Brainstorm could do anything. So Scooty wins that set 2-1. So game 1 of Fur versus Mouth on our Plasma White Stake. In the first shop, as we've said before, you gotta open that first buffoon pack. Malf takes the Arcana instead and is heavily punished for it when there is a business card in it that Fur is able to make a ton of money off of. Malf almost catches up when he's down 1-4 because there's a blueprint that Fur found because of the money that Malf was able to find another copy of later on. And he takes a hack that Fur doesn't see, but Fur is just able to have a better hand with more glass and is able to take the final life off of Mouth there. In the second game, we were on red deck gold stake. Mouth loses a total of 3 lives, including their last life to the blinds. Fur also had better econ in that game. It was building up a fairly strong obelisk, or like a potentially strong obelisk that probably would have closed the game anyways if the blinds hadn't done it to Mouth. In the third game was quite a wild one. We were on Nebula deck gold stake. Both players, early on, Mouth goes with an Eternal Rough Gem, while Fur opens the pack and takes an Eternal Fibonacci. Just a little bit of divergence there. That doesn't end up being the main focus of the game, though, as later on, both players take an Eternal Madness,
Mhm.
and then in the next shop, Photo Chad shows up, neither of them Eternal. So what Mouth does is Mouth picks up Photo Chad, and also Chad is perishable, so wouldn't have stayed around forever, even without the madness. Mouth takes the Photo Chad and ends up skipping just constantly, leaves madness at 1 times to keep the Photo Chad, which is, I think both options are viable. Fur does not do this, is able to find more stuff than Mouth, is able to get some times molten stuff. The times 8 from Photo Chad isn't enough. Mouth also ends up not drawing the 1 glass in their deck in the final PvP, and Fur is able to take that one. So that set went to Fur taking the 3-0 win there. All right, so the next set was me versus Doc. Had a lot of fun in the set, was looking forward to it, and did enjoy it. The first game on Plasma White Stake, I know it's staying, but this game makes me wish that comeback money, which has gotten removed from the ranked rule set, makes me wish it was also leaving Major League, because I feel like I lost because of comeback money. I could be wrong, but this isn't going to be a common thing that it's going to be this like precise. But Doc and I were in such similar lines. In the first PvP, I take a slightly greedier discard, could go right, could go wrong. It ends up working out for me, and I win the first PvP. Doc uses that slight bit of more money to take one more reroll than I do, gets 8 Ball and Chad in that last reroll. And the game ends up still being close. I do find a sneaky dusk from a judgment that Doc doesn't find, but with how much value he's been able to get out of 8 Ball Chad all game, and he even finds Invis for a second photo by once again rolling 1 time deeper than I do, I believe. And Doc is able to take the win on that one. In the second game, we were on White Zodiac. I do end up a reroll voucher early that Doc does not take, but Doc is able to kind of use that tempo to get me down to 1 life, and he's up 4-1. I get a Bloodstone Oops, which Doc does not go with, and Bloodstone Oops is strong and all, but when you're in the vanilla rule set, that means that the glass, which is very important to play, breaks 50% of the time. So I take a Tarot Tycoon, which is not usually something you want to take because, especially on Zodiac deck, that means you're seeing so few Jokers in the shop. But I felt like I just really needed the glass to sustain the glass that would be breaking in the PvPs. And it ends up being incredibly close. I go down to 1-2. And then as I draw and I'm about to play my final hand, the server crashes. So,
Oh,
or the server like gets reset. So both of us disconnected, just taken back and taken out of it. And it was like, no, but people were able to do the math. And as unfortunate as it is, I would have not won that one anyways. Thankfully I had drawn my final hand, and somewhat thankfully, honestly, I was down to 1 life, so at least we can choose a winner without it being ambiguous or having to rerun the game or anything. So
mhm.
Doc does actually, firmly take that one despite the DC, because we were able to know for sure that he would have won. The third and final game, Doc wants to take me to Gold Stake, and I was like, you know what? How about we do Black Gold? Are you down for that?
Mm.
And he says yes. And it was a good one. It was fun. So early on, there is a rental burnt joker. Doc takes it. I do not. I still stand by not taking it, although I acknowledge and agree that with what Doc said later, that on a different seed, the eternal rental, or sorry, not eternal rental, it was just rental. The rental burnt joker take could have totally paid off. He was grinding up some pair levels on a weaker seed. If I wasn't able to survive, that totally could have done it. However, There was an Eternal Riffraff, which ended up giving some pretty solid jokers. And then eventually I was able to find an Eternal Photo and Eternal Chat, ended up being a very strong seed, both econ and scoring wise.
Mhm.
There's also tons of glass that shows up. I'm able to build into Flush 5. In fact, I think I had 2 red seals and full glass on my final flush house hand at the end. Doc also had a really neat play towards the end where he built into hackable glass with 2s. He was able to strengthen up because we both had a glass red seal ace. I just played a flush house with some face cards with glass with the photo chat with that. But Doc builds into hack and is able to get a 4 of a kind with 2s and then throws in another ace that he wasn't able to strength yet with a splash. Ends up being very close. He was behind by about a ×3, and Doc said that there was some ×3 jokers that he could have taken.
Mm.
So Doc might have been able to come back and take that one if he had taken one of those ×3 jokers. Although I also in the last shot, I believe I was up 3-1. In the last shot before the final PvP, I took an Eternal Showman because I was hoping to find more photo chat, which I was excited to see if that was going to pay off. But unfortunately, did not get to see because Doc was not able to beat my very strong hand. I was able to draw, even though he drew a very strong hand as well. And I was able to sneak 1 win out, and Doc took that set 2-1. Had a lot of fun with that one.
Yeah, as far as my opinion on that play that Doc made at the very beginning, I think on a deck that's not black deck on Gold Stake, I don't think you take the Burn Joker, especially in a multiplayer context, because it's probably not going to end up being pairs. But on black deck Gold Stake, it's a lot harder to draw your hand, so I can definitely see,
Fair.
picking up that Burn Joker, getting the pair levels, and at least having survivability. So, your opponent dies to blinds. If the street C is not very strong, then you can just win that way. Like I've done it, I've seen it,
Yeah,
I've had it
yeah.
happen to me. So I definitely don't disagree with that play.
Rentals are just I see it, but I've just realized how insanely punishing. Like I would rather take an eternal burnt than a rental burnt.
Mm.
I feel like it's at least at the beginning. Once you've got
Yeah,
any sort of econ going, sure. But
but
when you have no econ, taking a rental on gold stake in multiplayer is just so painful.
yeah. No, was it rental, not perishable?
Yeah, it was just rental. Yeah,
Okay.
it was rental.
In my mind, it was perishable. In which case, I would be like, yeah, probably take that.
Oh, sorry, maybe I misspoke, but yeah, it was rental.
Yeah, rental's a lot harder to take on your gold stakes, especially early when you have no econ. If you had like a mail and rebate, then yeah, take a rental. You can afford that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Anyway, let's go into our next game, which is Roffle versus Bean. I was pretty excited for this one because again, it was our 2 winners, Roffle versus Bean. This one, very strong showing by Bean. Not gonna lie. Game 1, I think, was the closest. It was probably our strongest showing from both players. Bean able to get a really commanding econ lead, gets a Terra Merchant to get glass online earlier, and Bean's able to win this one with 2 lives left, even though those high scores pretty dang close. We have E20 to E20. Bean wins like the thinnest of margins with these high scores. 5 E20 to 2 E20, like crazy close. If Roth will be able to win that PvP, maybe it would have been possible to come back, but Bean was just in a very commanding position there. Game 2, we went to gold stake. We went to red deck, and Bean was able to again get that econ lead. That's pretty much the theme of this entire set, is being able to get the econ lead. That leads into a scoring lead, and he wins this game with 2 lives left. And then game 3, we go back to red gold. Same kind of thing as game 2. Bean gets that econ lead. Actually, rerolls Roffle by a pretty significant margin in this one, and that again leads to a nice scoring lead. And Bean's able to win this one with 3 lives left. So a very strong showing by Bean, a 3-0. Not what I was expecting from these 2 players, but Bean is on a very hot streak to start this season. I don't think he's dropped a game yet the entire season, which very impressive showing from Bean, especially against a player with the caliber of Roffle. So very strong showing by Bean, and it was a 3-0 for him.
All right, so our next set was Bear versus Rarran. So in the first game on our White Stake Plasma, Rarran had an early lead, but then he ends up at a huge econ disadvantage because both players have a Paradolia, a Midas Mask, and a Faceless shows up in the shop, which are great things to have with Paradolia. Rarran skips them both. He does keep a business card instead, which, while good with Paradolia, I think both of the other 2 are better and stronger. Rarran still could have maybe taken the win at that one because it seemed like more opportunities came up for him to make Red Seal glass. However, with the Ancient Joker, he decided to prioritize the consistency of wild cards over the glass, but glass is just more than your wilds.
Mm-hmm.
Even with Ancient, like it's 1.5 times versus 2 times, and it's just not enough, and Bear ends up taking the win there. In game two, we went to white checkered,
Hmm.
and Rarran played a much better econ game earlier with business card, and he ends up being up an invis. Not only that, he takes a driver's license and ends up being up a second invis because driver's license blocks into an invis. So he ends up with double photo and double. I wrote double chat here, but I feel like it was double dusk. Yeah, no, I wrote that down wrong. He ends up with double photo and double dusk. And then not only that, in the final PvP, I think he was like strongly winning anyways, but he finds an idol that Bear does not find and is able to make an off hit work with a flush house and just completely crushes Bear in that final PvP. So Rarran takes that one. So game three was on Gold Stake Checker deck. And this one, it was close. We weren't sure between this one and the Zano Halion game for which one to make game of the week. This one is very close behind. In fact, you know, in some opinions, maybe this one is. So this game was wild. Both players early on, they take a Cola rare skip, giving a perishable Baron and a perishable hit the road. So neither very useful. Raren goes ahead and takes two more skips, taking a double tag and a buffoon pack skip, which I don't hate on Gold Stake. You see 8 jokers. It's probably amount that you're gonna see in the shop, and they're free, and you're not making a ton of money off the blinds anyways with no econ. Not a lot comes out of those buffoon packs, and Bear is able to find 3 glass between the other blinds with a very lucky cryptid on the 1 glass card in his deck in those blinds that Raren missed. However, in the next ante, the players find a throwback. It's already at 1.75 times for Raren, and Raren starts committing to this throwback, which I don't think I've ever seen anyone do this hard in a multiplayer game. He gets it up to 3.25 times by the end of the game. Not only that, it starts looking like it's actually going to work when Raren was down 2 lives to 3, but then Fur loses lives back to the blind. So Fur goes down to 1 to Raren's 2. However, in that final shop, when Fur is down at 1, that Raren did not see, in the Arcana pack, there is a soul, and the soul gives a tribulate. So suddenly Raren is down trib, and there is no coming back from that. And the 3.25 times throwback is not enough. Bear ends up taking that game, and Bear wins the set 2-1.
Our next game was Nito versus Edzy. This one pretty interesting. Edzy, again, we're starting off on Plasma White for game 1. Edzy able to take a pretty commanding econ lead in this game 1. Edzy actually able to convert that econ lead into scoring lead pretty fast and is able to win with 3 lives remaining, which is pretty strong, especially on that white stake. Game 2, we go to blue stake, which is interesting. I haven't seen much blue stake this season so far, and we're going to Zodiac deck. Surprised we aren't going to any higher stakes. I know Edzy's is definitely a fan of higher stakes, but we end up on blue stake Zodiac deck. This one goes down to the very final life, last life each. They both earn about the exact same amount of money. They're very even, literally the exact same amount of rerolls. Edzy barely able to take this final PvP, and Edzy wins this one with only 1 life left. So that was probably the closest game of the set here was game 2 on that blue stake. Game 3, we go to yellow deck white stake, and Edzy kind of just demolishes here, gets an econ lead, outspends Nito by a very strong margin, able to convert that into very strong scoring. And it's pretty much over from there. Edzy actually wins this one 4-0. Nito just not able to get stuff online in time to handle what Edzy was putting up on his end. It's a very strong showing by Edzy. This is a 3-0 for him. And we'll go to our next game. This one was Gothic Lord versus Nemo. Again, Plasma White was our very first game of the set. This one, it's a 4-0, but it's one of those where it's like, oh, it was a close 4-0, you know?
Yeah.
Gothic is able to get that glass online. He's able to convert into that molt and able to get a very strong scoring off. Nemo actually ends up outspending Gothic in this set, but Gothic's able to get that lives online and make that pivot slightly earlier, get that scoring, and in that final PvP, he's able to win it just barely. I think it's E19 to E17. It's a very close one there. Nemo with that econ lead, I'm not sure where it would have gone if it had gone past that last life. The Gothic was able to take off of Nemo, so interesting game there to see how it would have gone if it had continued, but Gothic takes that one with 4 lives left. Next game, we go to Purple Stake. I know Gothic's a fan of Purple Stake, and we go to Ghost Deck. This one goes down to the very last life. Very similar kind of story where Nemo actually, again, outspends Gothic, but Gothic able to slightly convert that into scoring more than Nemo, and is able to take this one on the very last life, even though having spent less money, earned less money, etc. Game 3, back to Ghost deck. We go to Black Stake this time, slightly different. Again, story of the story of the set. Nemo gets that econ lead, but Gothic able to convert that into the scoring faster than Nemo was. So very interesting that Nemo actually outspent Gothic, out-earned the money in every single one of these games, but Gothic was still able to take it 3-0. So one of those situations where getting slightly more econ didn't necessarily lead to winning the whole set. Gothic again wins 3-0 for this one. And I think it's a very interesting thing that could happen on your Major League because it just depends on when you decide to reroll. So good win for Gothic, 3-0. Xano versus Halion, we've already talked about, so we'll go to our final game of the week, which is C-Dubs versus Feinberg. This one, in all honesty, kind of the definition of a blowout. Feinberg was actually the one who kept more lives than anyone else this week. Feinberg wins this game 1 on Plasma White with 4 lives left, scores up to an E21. Very strong showing by Feinberg. Game 2, we go to Red Stake Yellow deck. Interesting stake. I don't think I've seen Red Stake either in this season, so we're getting all the stakes, I guess. This one, again, goes really, really strong. Feinberg actually outscores his Plasma score. So on Plasma, he scored E21. In this game, on the yellow deck, he scores E22. It's a very, very strong showing. Spends over $1,000. Feinberg just played very, very well. This one he wins with 2 lives left. And then our final game is on Zodiac deck White Stake. Feinberg again, very strong showing. Gets that econ, converts that into scoring. He wins this one with E13 on the board to C-Dubs E8. And again, 3 lives left. So Feinberg, really, really strong. He only lost 3 lives total over the entirety of this set. So strong showing for Feinberg with the 3-0. And that concludes our 3-0 session.
One thing I wanted to note really quick. We got a couple comments asking about the Rarran Scooty game from week 1 that ended up in week 2, so it like never got talked about. Apparently that was an interesting one. I was gonna try to watch the games and talk about them today, but I just did not have time to watch a 6 set this week. So, maybe you'll get a very late recap of that next week. We'll see.
If it's the #1 comment and everyone likes it.
Yeah. Comment if you still want to see that recap, comment, let us know.
Yep. And then maybe we'll both watch. It'll be our game of the week from 2 weeks ago.
Game of the first half of the season.
Yep. So let's go over the standings. I will start with the Onyx division here. Like I said, Bean is in a very strong, commanding lead, #1. He has not dropped a game yet this season. So he's sitting there at 12 points, 3 matches won. Every single game he's won. In second place, we have a tie between Feinberg and Vagabond. Again, those players have won every single one of their matches, but some of them went 2-1, so they're not as strong as Bean, but still a very strong showing. Undefeated as far as sets go for Feinberg and Vagabond. In fourth place, we have Gothic Lord UK. So the rest of these players, so Gothic Lord and Edsy, have won 2 matches. And then we go to Roffle and C-Dubs after that, who've won 1, and the rest of them have not yet won a set. So very interesting seeing Roffle down here in 6th place. They've had some difficult opponents. I think Bean and Vagabond they've played and lost to, so we'll see how it goes for them the rest of the season. But there's the standings for the Onyx division.
Over in the Bloodstone division, Xano and Dr. Spectred are holding strongly at the top of the leaderboard. Both of them losing their very first game ever for the season this week, with me taking 1 game off Doc and Halion taking 1 off Xano. Right behind them, we've got Fur at 8 points, Belanos and Rarran tied at 4th with 7, and then Halion and I tied down at 6 with 5 points each.
And then we will go to our schedule for week 4.
All right, so Monday, we've got Dr. Spectred versus Scooty at 2 p.m. EST. And then on Tuesday, we have Mouth versus Rarran at 2 p.m. and Xano versus Bear at 6 p.m.
And then later that same day, we have C-Dubs versus Nito at 8:30. Again, all of these will be in EST.
Yep, and then Wednesday, we have HC Justin versus Halion at 2 p.m. So hey, if you want a regular game at 2 p.m. for the first 3 days, you've got it. And then me versus Fur, a little bit overlapping at 3 p.m. also on Wednesday.
And then later that same day, Roffle versus Nandre at 6 p.m. On Thursday, we have Nemo versus Edzy at 3 p.m. Friday, we've got Bean versus Gothic at 1 p.m. And then later that same day, Vagabond versus Feinberg at 4 p.m. EST. Again, for this week, I will ask Sizak, what are you looking forward to?
I think for me, the game that I'm most looking forward to is probably the Zeno versus Belenos Bear. I think they're two of the strongest players in the Bloodstone division,
Mhm.
and very curious to see how that one goes.
Yeah, I think from my division, I'm pretty excited about Vagabond versus Feinberg. They're both players who have not dropped a set yet this season. They're both slightly below Bean because they've dropped some games, but I think that'll determine who gets second place for the next week's standings for Vagabond versus Feinberg. So both strong players. I'm excited to see how that one ends up going.
Yeah, that will be exciting too. Feinberg, the very impressive newcomer to multiplayer. It
Yeah,
is
he's
crazy
been
how
killing
fast
it.
he's gotten good at it.
Thank you all for tuning in again for this weekly recap, and we'll see y'all next week. Peace.
See ya.